tall man quietly pulled a suitcase across the hotel lobby in the early morning hours. Footage captured by the security cameras at the Miami Airport Regency Hotel appeared ordinary at first glance. Yet, behind that routine scene lay a horrifying crime. Inside the heavy suitcase was not clothing or personal belongings, but a young woman who had been reduced to a helpless victim. Only a few hours later, she was discovered lying motionless along a roadside. Her body was unclothed and covered with injuries consistent with a violent assault. Investigators would later determine that this case was not an isolated incident, but part of a series of serious crimes that had occurred across Florida. At the time, the identity of the young woman and the man seen pulling the suitcase remained unknown. The story unfolded in Miami during the early 2000s, a period when the city symbolized the tropical lifestyle of the United States. Sunlit beaches, rows of coastal high-rises, and an energetic pace of life created an image of glamour and prosperity. Tourism and entertainment flourished as visitors arrived from around the world to experience the region's distinctive, Latin-influenced culture and vibrant nightlife. One of the most prominent events was the annual International Boat Show in Miami, where wealthy visitors gathered to admire luxury yachts and advanced marine technology. Each season transformed the city into a meeting place for elite collectors and boating enthusiasts, reinforcing South Florida's reputation for affluence and style in the early 21st century. Yet in 2005, that polished image was overshadowed by a particularly brutal crime in a suburban neighborhood. The case began early in the morning, on the 21st of May, 2005, in a sparsely populated residential area on the outskirts of Miami. An electrical worker discovered a woman lying unconscious among tall grass near a cul-de-sac. Alarmed by the sight, he immediately contacted the police. Officers arrived quickly and confirmed that the victim was still breathing, but in critical condition, prompting immediate transport to the hospital. Detective Alan Fute, the lead investigator, was shocked by what he saw at the scene. The young woman lay on the cold ground, unclothed, covered in blood, and showing clear signs of severe physical abuse. Initial assessment suggested that the victim had been attacked elsewhere and then abandoned at that location. The area was quiet and rarely visited, meaning she might not have survived if the worker had not happened to pass by. The scene contained almost no evidence. The victim had no identification, and the only object recovered was a blue blanket lying beside her body. Investigators carefully collected the blanket as evidence, but it revealed little useful information. No clear fingerprints or identifying marks were found. Officers canvassed nearby homes, yet no residents reported seeing or hearing anything unusual during the night. It appeared that the attacker had transported the victim to the area and left before dawn. Analysis of the location indicated that it was only a dumping site, rather than the place where the assault occurred. On the soft soil mixed with grass, investigators found no clear tire tracks or drag marks. The attacker may have carried the victim from a vehicle and departed quickly. The victim's physical condition showed evidence of a violent assault. Her face was severely swollen and bruised, with dried blood visible on her skin. Marks around her neck and wrists suggested restraint or strangulation. At Jackson Memorial Hospital, doctors confirmed that she had suffered a serious head injury, a fractured eye socket, and numerous cuts and abrasions across her body. Medical examination also confirmed sexual assault. Forensic technicians collected biological samples believed to belong to the attacker for DNA testing. This evidence offered hope that investigators could later identify the perpetrator if a suspect were found. While the laboratory analysis was underway, Detective Fute and his team continued examining the blue blanket, but found no additional clues. The item was likely used to wrap the victim during transport, yet it provided no indication of the attacker's identity. The lack of evidence created an early deadlock in the investigation. Police shifted their focus toward identifying the victim. Missing person reports in the region were reviewed urgently, but none matched her description. Throughout May 21, the young woman remained unconscious in intensive care, preventing investigators from obtaining any statement. In an effort to develop leads, officers visited nearby hotels within roughly 16 kilometers of the discovery site, including the Miami Airport Regency Hotel, to check whether any young female guests had disappeared unexpectedly. At that stage, however, security footage had not yet been reviewed because there was no clear indication that the victim had stayed there. For the moment, investigators could only wait for her to regain consciousness. Fortunately, on the morning of the 22nd of May, 2005, the victim began to recover awareness. Although she was in pain and unable to speak due to throat injuries, she managed to communicate by signaling for paper and a pen. Investigators watched closely as she slowly wrote down the first pieces of information. She identified herself as Inna Budiska, a 1-year-old woman from Ukraine who worked for a yacht company operating out of Miami Harbor. She also provided the name and phone number of her attorney so police could verify her identity. One unusual detail left Detective Fute deeply puzzled. Why would a victim who had just regained consciousness after a brutal attack immediately ask for a lawyer? The reaction seemed strange and suggested that some legal matter might be involved. As Inna gradually recovered, the mystery became clearer. Before the assault, Inna Budiska had been involved in a civil lawsuit. She had suffered an injury while working aboard a yacht and had filed a compensation claim against the company. While the case was pending, the company arranged temporary accommodation for her at the Miami Airport Regency Hotel so she could rest and recover. Attorney Mitchell Lipcon was the only person Inna knew and trusted in the United States. It was therefore natural that upon regaining consciousness, she instinctively asked for his help. Detective Fute contacted the lawyer immediately, and Lipcon confirmed that his client was, indeed, Inna Budiska, a Ukrainian yacht employee currently staying at the hotel under arrangements made by her employer. With that confirmation, the victim's identity became clear. Inna Budiska was born in 1,983 inches, Ukraine, and grew up during the period following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Like many young people of her generation, she dreamed of seeing the wider world. She left her family behind and traveled to the United States to work on international yachts, hoping both to gain experience and to earn money to support relatives back home. During her time in Miami, Inna lived quietly at the hotel arranged by her employer and had limited social contact outside of work. Aside from occasional meetings with her attorney regarding the lawsuit, she interacted mainly with a small circle of coworkers. Despite her young age, she demonstrated independence and determination by pursuing legal action to defend her rights. Friends described Inna as friendly and hardworking. Even while living far from home, she remained emotionally close to her family. On the night of the incident, she had dinner with a coworker, a young American man of Greek descent who worked aboard the same vessel, and returned to the hotel around midnight. The crucial question remained: what happened afterward? Once the victim's identity had been established, Detective Fute began reconstructing Inna Budiska's movements during the night of the attack. After passing the most critical stage of treatment, Inna cooperated with investigators as much as she could, although her memory remained unclear. She recalled that on the evening of the 20th of May, 2005, she had dinner with a friend in the Coconut Grove area before returning to the hotel shortly before midnight. At approximately 3:30 UKM, she left her room alone and walked to a nearby store to buy a prepaid phone card so she could call her mother. Because of the time difference, it was daytime in Ukraine. Hotel security footage confirmed that Inna left the building at about 3:33 a.m. and returned only 7 minutes later at 3:40 a.m. The last recorded image showed her entering an elevator at 3:41 a.m. to go up to her room. After that moment, she did not appear again on any camera. The period between 3:41 a.m. and about 8:30 a.m., when she was eventually discovered, became the central mystery. Detective Fute and his team examined the hotel's electronic keycard system and found that her room door had been opened at 3:58 a.m., 17 minutes after she entered the elevator. This raised a troubling question. Where had she been during those 17 minutes? At first, investigators did not rule out negative possibilities. One theory suggested that she might have secretly left the hotel to meet someone before returning to her room, potentially placing herself in danger. Another, more controversial line of inquiry considered whether she might have been involved in undisclosed activities and encountered a violent individual. However, these suspicions were soon dismissed. No evidence suggested that Inna had left the hotel again or led a complicated private life. The 17-minute discrepancy was eventually explained by differences in the time settings between the surveillance cameras and the electronic lock system. The victim had not disappeared voluntarily. The attack had taken place inside the hotel. Investigators refocused their attention on the last men known to have interacted with Inna that night. Security footage showed that two individuals had spoken with her: Jorge Perez, the night manager on duty, and Peter Gemis, the co-worker who had accompanied her to dinner. Perez attracted particular attention because he possessed a master key that allowed access to every room. Security cameras recorded him entering an elevator with Inna at about 2:16 a.m., after which the two remained alone on an upper floor for roughly 15 minutes before he returned to the lobby. During the initial questioning, Perez claimed that Inna had been intoxicated and that he had merely helped her back to her room. Confronted with additional evidence, Perez later admitted that his relationship with Inna had gone beyond ordinary professional contact. The two had developed a personal connection and had met privately that night. Even so, Perez insisted that when he left her room she was safe and unharmed, and he denied any involvement in the later attack. At the same time, Peter Gemis, the co-worker who had accompanied Inna to dinner, was also questioned. Investigators collected DNA samples from both Perez and Peter and compared them with the biological evidence recovered from Inna's body. The laboratory results excluded both men as suspects, since neither matched the attacker's DNA profile. Although the perpetrator had not yet been identified, investigators concluded that the attacker was likely not among the victim's close acquaintances. Meanwhile, Inna Budiska's physical condition gradually improved, allowing investigators to interview her more thoroughly. However, her memory remained fragmented and unclear, creating a serious obstacle for the investigation. Trying to reconstruct what had happened, she told Detective Fute that she vaguely remembered more than one man attacking her. She believed there may have been two attackers, possibly white men who spoke with accents that sounded Spanish. She recalled being forced down and struggling to breathe when one of them pressed a pillow or some soft object against her face until everything went dark. She also described a sensation of being carried down a staircase somewhere at the back of the building and then thrown into a vehicle. According to her account, the attackers continued assaulting her inside the car while laughing and making crude remarks as she lay nearly unconscious. These statements, however, conflicted with the physical evidence and complicated the investigation. Surveillance footage showed no sign of her being taken out through a rear exit or stairwell. Evidence suggested a single attacker, yet Inna spoke of two or even three individuals. Detective Fute began to question the reliability of her memory. He considered the possibility that she might be withholding information, perhaps out of embarrassment if she had voluntarily gone somewhere with someone before the attack. Another possibility was that medication or trauma had produced confusion and distorted recollections. In an effort to clarify the situation, investigators even consulted a specialist in forensic hypnosis to help her recover more precise memories. Under hypnosis, she described additional details, including being driven to an empty area and assaulted inside a vehicle, by a man who laughed while pressing on her neck. Nevertheless, these statements remained unverified and did not align with the available evidence. Weeks passed with little progress, and the investigation nearly stalled. Detective Fute eventually admitted that the case had reached a dead end, with the various pieces of information failing to form a coherent picture. At that point, a new development revived the case. Ina Budiska filed a lawsuit against the hotel where she had been staying, claiming that inadequate security had allowed the attack to occur. The management of the Miami Airport Regency Hotel strongly denied responsibility and sought to establish the facts in order to protect the hotel's reputation. This decision led to the involvement of a key figure, private investigator Ken Brennan. The hotel hired Brennan, a veteran investigator and former police officer from New York with experience in federal narcotics enforcement, to conduct an independent inquiry into whether any security failures had occurred. Brennan had a reputation for solving difficult cases, and his involvement would eventually prove decisive. From the beginning, he was intrigued by the unusual details surrounding the investigation. He contacted Detective Fute and proposed working together. Fute was initially reluctant, since Brennan had been hired by the hotel and might be motivated primarily by the civil case. Brennan argued that both sides shared the same objective, identifying the real attacker. He promised to share all findings and leave any arrest decisions entirely to the police, requesting in return access to the investigative material already collected. Eventually, the authorities agreed to cooperate with the experienced private investigator. Brennan began by reviewing the entire case file and carefully examining the hotel's surveillance recordings. Approaching the evidence with methodical reasoning, he focused on a fundamental question: what facts were certain? It was established that Ina had reached her room safely at 3:41 a.m., and by approximately 8:30 a.m., she had been found seriously injured, about 16 kilometers away. At some point during that interval, she must have left the hotel. The unresolved question was why no camera recorded her departure. After studying the building's security layout, Brennan noted that all entrances and exits were monitored by motion-activated cameras. If Ina had left the building through a normal exit, she would certainly have been recorded. The only alternative was that she had not left in a conventional way. This idea led Brennan to review the footage from a different perspective. Instead of searching for images of Ina herself, he began identifying anyone who left the hotel during the critical hours under unusual circumstances. By patiently reviewing frame after frame from multiple cameras throughout the night, Brennan gradually eliminated individuals who clearly had no connection to the incident. Anyone who departed before Ina returned to her room and never came back was excluded. Guests carrying only small bags or no luggage were dismissed, as were families and women whose movements could be easily explained. Eventually, only one person remained, a tall black man wearing glasses who appeared on camera at a crucial moment. The footage showed that shortly after Ina returned to the Miami Airport Regency Hotel at 3:40 a.m., a large man approached her in the lobby and exchanged a few words before entering the elevator with her at 3:41 a.m. He was the only unidentified individual known to have interacted with her during that time. The same man was later recorded leaving the elevator at the lobby level at 5:28 a.m., pulling a large wheeled suitcase. He calmly rolled the suitcase out the front entrance toward the parking area and disappeared from view. About an hour later, cameras recorded him returning alone without the suitcase. His behavior appeared highly unusual, removing luggage from the hotel at 5 in the morning, well before checkout time, and then returning shortly afterward suggested something abnormal. Brennan became convinced that this man was the primary suspect and considered the possibility that Ina had been transported inside the suitcase. Although the idea sounded disturbing, it matched the known timeline of events. Detective Fute was stunned when Brennan presented his findings. The next task was to determine the identity of the unknown man. While repeatedly reviewing the recordings, Brennan noticed another important detail. In several scenes, the suspect appeared alongside co-workers wearing shirts with the word Verado printed on the back. From this clue, Brennan concluded that the men were likely connected to the Miami boat exhibition that was taking place at the time. Verado was the name of a marine engine produced by Mercury Marine, one of the major sponsors of the event. Further investigation suggested that only food service staff at the exhibition had been issued those specific Verado shirts. Based on the timing and the group's movements, Brennan suspected that they were temporary workers brought to Miami for the event, possibly through a catering contractor from New Orleans. The lead developed further when Brennan contacted a former colleague in New Orleans police, Captain Ernest Demma, and asked him to review employment records from the catering company Centerplate. Demma recalled a very large man with glasses who had traveled from New Orleans to work at the Miami boat exhibition and later disappeared following Hurricane Katrina. His name was Mike Jones. The commonness of the name made the search difficult, but it provided the first solid lead. Brennan then examined the guest records at the Miami Airport Regency Hotel for the week of the attack and found that a man named Jones had stayed there from May 14 to the 22nd of May, 2005. The dates matched the schedule of the boat exhibition, and records showed that he checked out on May 22, only one day after the assault. The address listed on his registration form in Virginia was outdated, and the phone number belonged to the catering company rather than to him personally. Nevertheless, investigators now had a clear primary suspect. His full name was Michael L. Jones, born in 1972 and an American citizen. He had a striking physical appearance, a large black man, approximately 1.9 meters tall and weighing well over 130 kilograms, with massive arms and a heavy build. Despite his imposing size, women who had met Jones described him as polite and soft-spoken. He usually wore thin-framed glasses that gave him an intellectual and harmless appearance. Jones had lived mainly in the southern United States. His early life and family background appeared unremarkable. He had been married and had children, but his constant travel for work meant that little was known about his private life. Former co-workers described him as reliable and friendly, someone who avoided alcohol and rarely caused problems. Professionally, Jones worked in mobile food service. He managed concession stands and temporary food operations at fairs, sporting events, and exhibitions. Because of the nature of the job, he frequently moved between states on short-term contracts. He had previously worked for Centerplate in New Orleans, and later for other catering companies in Florida and elsewhere, traveling from Louisiana to Florida, Maryland, and Colorado. In each location, he typically stayed only a few weeks before moving on, blending easily among temporary workers and disappearing before attracting attention. Tracking him down proved difficult, especially after Hurricane Katrina, when Jones seemed to vanish from New Orleans. Even Centerplate no longer had current information about his whereabouts. Even so, Ken Brennan did not give up. He compiled a list of mobile event service companies similar to Centerplate across the United States and methodically contacted each one, asking about Jones. After dozens of calls and repeated inquiries, he finally found a lead through a company called Ovation in Tampa, Florida. They confirmed that a man named Michael Jones was working as a concession supervisor at a minor league baseball stadium in Frederick, Maryland. Brennan immediately coordinated with Detective Fute to locate him. In April 2006, Fute and a colleague traveled to Maryland. They discreetly contacted Jones under the pretext of verifying information about the Miami boat exhibition. Jones agreed to meet voluntarily, unaware that he was a suspect. During the first meeting, Michael Jones appeared calm and courteous. He was large and soft-spoken, wearing glasses and presenting an intellectual appearance that contrasted sharply with the brutality of the crime under investigation. Over 3 days of brief interviews, Jones answered questions as if he had nothing to hide. He confirmed that he had been in Miami in 2005 for the exhibition and had stayed at the Miami Airport Regency Hotel, but he denied meeting or having any relationship with any woman there. When Fute asked whether he would provide a DNA sample, Jones immediately agreed. His willingness to cooperate created uncertainty for the investigators. Brennan, however, believed it was a calculated strategy. Several months later, laboratory analysis confirmed that Michael L. Jones was the man who had assaulted Inna Budiska. After receiving the results, Brennan returned to Maryland and worked with Fute to arrest Jones in October 2006. During questioning at the police department in Frederick, Jones's true character began to emerge. Despite being confronted with DNA evidence and crime scene photographs, he continued to deny everything. He angrily pushed the photographs aside, but could not explain how his DNA had been left behind. Brennan watched carefully, waiting for a mistake. Eventually, Jones slipped when questioned about the suitcase seen on surveillance footage. Asked why he had struggled with it while leaving the elevator, Jones claimed the suitcase contained heavy books. Brennan asked him to name the books. Jones could not answer. His hesitation exposed the lie, yet he still refused to confess. He insisted that any sexual contact had been consensual and denied kidnapping or violence. Later in 2006, Jones was formally charged in Miami with sexual assault, kidnapping, and aggravated battery against Inna Budiska. However, as the trial approached, the case nearly collapsed. The central weakness was the victim's testimony. Because of head injuries, Inna had given inconsistent statements. Defense lawyers argued that she was an unreliable witness. Physical evidence also presented challenges. DNA confirmed sexual contact, but did not by itself prove lack of consent. The suitcase and rental vehicle could not be recovered. Jones refused to admit guilt and maintained that the encounter had been voluntary. Prosecutors in Florida recognized that conviction at trial would be uncertain. They offered a plea agreement. Jones would plead guilty to armed sexual assault and aggravated battery in exchange for dismissal of more serious charges. Understanding the strength of the DNA evidence, Jones accepted the agreement in 2007. The sentence shocked Inna: 2 years in prison. Although disappointed, she took some comfort in the fact that he had at least been exposed and punished. For Brennan, however, the case was not finished. He believed Jones had committed other crimes during his travels. He asked that Jones's DNA be entered into the national database. Police complied and uploaded the profile into CODIS. The results confirmed Brennan's suspicions. Later in 2007, CODIS reported 3 matches linking Jones to unsolved sexual assaults in other states. Inna Budiska turned out to be only one of several victims. The matched cases included 1 in Colorado and 2 in New Orleans. In Colorado, investigators had kept an unsolved case involving a 1-year-old woman named Jennifer Ressler. She had been attacked in her apartment during the early morning hours of the 1st of December, 2005, by a large man wearing glasses who had offered her a ride home before forcing his way inside. The case remained unsolved until CODIS identified Jones. In New Orleans, 2 women had reported similar assaults in 2003. One victim had accepted a ride after attending the local jazz festival. The attacker drove her to a secluded area and assaulted her inside the vehicle. She bit his hand during the struggle, leaving biological evidence that investigators preserved. Another woman reported a similar attack near a park the same year. Both cases had gone cold until the DNA match connected them to Jones. Investigators compared an earlier sketch with Jones's photograph and found a strong resemblance. The pattern became clear: New Orleans in 2003, Miami in 2005, Colorado in 2005. Once the cases were linked, prosecutors coordinated across jurisdictions. In July 2008, immediately after Jones completed his sentence in Florida, He was extradited to Colorado to face new charges. Despite lingering trauma, Inna traveled to Colorado to testify. The trial took place in 2009 and attracted significant public attention. Prosecutors faced a major difficulty. Jennifer Ressler had died from illness before the trial and could not testify. To compensate, prosecutors demonstrated a pattern of repeated offenses. The court allowed testimony from Inna Budiska and an anonymous victim from New Orleans to establish a consistent method of attack. Witness testimony gradually revealed the extent of Jones's crimes. The anonymous victim calmly described the assault years earlier and identified Jones in court as the attacker. When Inna testified, language barriers and memory gaps made her account uneven. Defense attorneys emphasized inconsistencies and suggested that the victims had fabricated their stories. Jones exercised his right to remain silent. Throughout the proceedings, he sat quietly beside his attorneys, occasionally turning toward his wife in the audience and shaking his head. He continued to claim that the encounters had been consensual. Despite these arguments, the evidence formed a coherent picture. DNA linked the crimes into a single pattern. The victims came from different places and times, yet all described the same type of attacker. After nearly 2 weeks of proceedings, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Jones guilty of first-degree sexual assault against Jennifer Ressler. In November 2009, the court in Colorado sentenced Michael L. Jones to 24 years to life for violent sexual assault and an additional 12 years to life for repeat offenses, with sentences running concurrently. He would be required to serve at least 24 years before becoming eligible for parole. Correctional authorities classified him as a high-risk offender. His first parole review was scheduled for 2031, though the likelihood of release was considered extremely low. On the day of sentencing, Inna Budiska sat silently in the courtroom before breaking into tears. They were no longer tears of fear, but of relief. Her testimony, together with DNA evidence and coordinated investigation across multiple agencies, finally brought the offender to justice. The case became known in the media as "The Woman in the Suitcase," a name that reflected its disturbing details and lasting impact. Do you think the criminal Michael John deserves a pardon? Share your opinion in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest videos. Goodbye, and see you again.